All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us in the world. Welcome. We are delighted to have you. My name is Agape Redwood Rogers, and I am the board search practice lead at FBCG, and I have the honor of recruiting highly qualified independent directors for private family boards. And it is my honor to be your moderator and your guide through this crucial topic today on how to select the right independent directors for your family business board. And so I am joined with exceptional speakers and my esteemed colleagues, Amy Bortz, FBCG Senior Consultant, who brings a lot of amazing insight. She serves on boards and she's also a recovering attorney, okay? as well as well as David Karofsky, principal consultant and owner at FBCG. He serves on the board of FBCG and other family business boards. And he's a second generation family business consultant and author. So we are delighted that they are with us today. Welcome, David and Amy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Well, David and Amy is going to walk us through some steps on the independent director selection process, sharing real world examples and providing practical tips to help family businesses make informed and confident decisions. Okay. So before we jump into our conversation, I want to give you a heads up that we're going to be doing a few polls and we're going to be taking questions throughout the program. And we're also going to be doing a survey concluding our webinar. And so if you have your questions, you can go ahead and place them in the Q&A section of Zoom, okay? You know, today we're going to be exploring how to approach thoughtfully and strategically this search process. So buckle up and be ready because we're going to get a lot of insightful, useful information for you today. So before we get started, I did say polls. So we're gonna do a poll because we wanna know what generation are you in your family business? You know, are you entrepreneur first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth, or fifth generation and beyond? Where are you in terms of where you are in your family business? All right, I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds to go ahead and put your answer in there. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Can we, Agape, we'll be able to see the result. Oh, perfect.
There
We
we
can see the
go.
results. I love it. I love it.
Spoke it right up, David. Spoke it right up.
That's right.
Yeah. So we have quite a few second generation and third generation family
Yeah.
members. Family.
Look at that, though. We got fourth and fifth.
That's
Yes.
exciting.
You guys are shattering the odds. Anybody past a third really is shattering odds here. This is just phenomenal. I love it.
Yes, it's amazing. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing your input. It's helpful to see where everyone is on their journey, and we'll make sure that we touch exactly on the significance of the generation and the evolution of it. David's going to talk a little bit about that in just a moment. So, where do we begin? Right? Like, let's look at the beginning of this process. How do you know when you're ready to bring on independence? You know, where you are in the stage of your board evolution, you know, because you can't plot a course to your destination to form a highly effective board without knowing exactly where you're starting from. So let's look at that. David, can you walk us through the evolution of a family business board?
Yeah, sure. And frankly, one of the reasons why we asked that polling question is because it helps inform us kind of where are you in your journey with respect to forming a board, both family board or independent board. So if you look at the slide we're showing here, it really is essentially talking about the evolution of a family business. So for those that are kind of G1, the entrepreneurial generation, you probably have a relatively informal board. It might be a paper only board. It may be a single owner and you're the board and you're the decision maker and chief bottle washer and everything else that goes along with being in the company. As you start to evolve and that family business moves from a G1 to a G2, you may start to think about bringing on possibly an advisory board. And it could be family only at first, and then saying, hey, let's bring in some independent advisors, not to vote and make decisions, but just simply guide and we maybe meet with them a couple of times a year. Maybe they have some input, they may have some industry experience, some folks that you may know within the industry, but they can start to provide some thoughts and ideas around how you evolve your family business and build a sustainable practice over time. As you start to get into the G3, G4 area, this is when we see a lot of the what I'll call the formalization of a board. It really evolves from an advisory board into an independent board. It may start with family majority as an independent, but this now becomes a board of directors, a fiduciary board, where the board has a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholder group. They vote, they make decisions. And so sometimes this can feel intimidating, and we'll talk about this throughout the webinar, but this can feel kind of almost unnerving to the ownership going, well, I don't want people making decisions for me. Don't forget, you always have the ultimate decision because you vote the board, and we'll talk about that today. And so often we see that evolution into the G3, G4, and even to the point where you have a non-family independent majority board of directors really guiding. And that's kind of the pinnacle. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about. That's where Agape really shows a lot of her value within FBCG, because we're able to use, we as the consultants, Amy and I and our colleagues are able to leverage Agape's experience and expertise to help you, the client, find the right independent member for your board as you go through this process.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, David. We have a poll, right, that we want to ask the audience when it comes to, we want to know where they are, where are you in the evolution of governance, right?
Exactly.
You have an informal family board, an advisory board without voting power, a fiduciary board with family members, or a fiduciary board with independent board members. Tell us exactly where you are. We're going to give you 30 seconds to tell us exactly where you are. And one of the things that I love about these polls is that you realize that you're not alone, and you are in a position to evolve and to grow no matter where you are. And so this is a really great thing to know exactly where you are so you can know where you want to go.
Yeah, great
All right,
point.
let's share those responses.
So let's see, where are we looking at here?
All
Okay,
right.
so about a quarter of you are an informal board, very understandable. It probably ties into where you are as a G1 or G2. A quarter of you are starting with an advisory board that has no voting decision, right? Makes sense. You're evolving into that fiduciary board. And then about a third of you have a fiduciary board of independent directors. I love it. Like that's where we're trying to go. It's frankly one of the biggest trends that we're seeing in the field of family business consulting are family businesses moving towards independent boards. And so, we're seeing it right here in proof of the people on today. A third of you are even starting to do that. And so this will also be relevant for you because not only do you have existing independents, but you're going to want to constantly evolve that and go, well, how do we add more? Or how do we know when they term out? So we'll be talking about that kind of stuff today as well.
Yeah, we sure will. And we have one more poll that we want to do. We want to know what is the biggest challenge your family business faces in selecting independent directors, right? Is it understanding what skills, traits are needed, or finding qualified candidates? Is it balancing family input and decision making? Or is it navigating disagreements during the selection process? Where do you feel is your biggest challenge? And your challenge may not even be up here. And if it's not up here, we get it.
Throw it in the questions, right?
Yeah.
Ask us,
Exactly.
put in the questions. We'll be able to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. For sure.
These are the most common challenges we hear about in our work that we do with families.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to give you guys 10 more seconds to really think about and note, like, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing? And again, like we said, if it's not here, you can drop it in the Q&A section if you want to definitely address it and make sure it's known to the panelists. All right. So the number one thing is understanding what skills and traits are needed.
I find that in my work all the time. It's like, okay, so we're bought into independence, but now what? Like we
Yeah.
believe you, it makes a difference, but how do we define what we need and how do we find them and how do we recruit them and are we going to be attractive enough? That's a lot of what the work that we do.
Yeah. The second major thing was balancing family input and decision making. And we're about to touch on that next. And then the next thing is just finding these qualified directors, finding some of these what we consider the unicorns, right? And then the last thing was navigating disagreements during the selection process, because this can be challenging for so many. So thank you guys for that. We definitely want to address that. Let's jump in. Let's jump in and talk about assessing your needs, right? So there's going to be 3 parts of this: assessing your needs, sourcing your candidates, and interviewing and selecting your candidates. But first, we're going to jump into assessing your needs, right? Private family businesses often face unique challenge when assessing their needs, right? And one of those biggest challenges could be alignment. As we saw, there are so many people commenting on that. And let's look at that. Amy, I want to start with you, right? Because you're a recovering attorney. You've seen some things, right? You've seen some things. Amy, can you tell us, how do we ensure alignment between the family and the stakeholders when setting strategic priorities for the board?
I think it's really important to have an independent facilitator help you walk that through, whether that be somebody like FBCG or your trusted accountant or a trusted lawyer or even a trusted advisor that you have that's attending your advisory meetings. But having somebody that can listen for connection instead of disagreement, educating all systems, family system, the leadership system, the ownership system, and if you have an existing governance system, looking at that as well. And then also educating all of those stakeholders on, you're here today, but in 5, 10, 15 years, you're going to be over here. And this is how a board with independent advisors with these kind of skills can support those transitions. So listening, education, finding connection, writing it down, getting an agreement between those groups, those stakeholder groups, then you do the search. If you do the search before you do that, you're probably not going to agree on who should be picked.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And the key in this piece, particularly when you're moving to independence, because it can feel a little daunting or unnerving, even this concept of loss of control. Having the family, be able to talk through this and set the intention and set the goal for what you're trying to achieve, and kind of approach it with curiosity and going that direction, but have very open, transparent conversations, and also establishing at the end of the day whose decision is this and how are they going to go about making the decision. That's going to help as well.
Yeah, that's a good point as well, David. Whose decision is this, right?
You have to have the why of it, though. I think that's what David and I are saying. Understand the why of the search, and then you move to how. The why is really important. Aligning around that why is super important.
Yeah, so I always say the how will come. You got to have the why. It's exactly right. Simon Sinek would be very proud of us.
I think so.
I don't think he knows who I am, but okay.
He should.
Well, okay, David, I want to turn it to you, right? Because, as we evaluate the current board, what are some of the best ways that we can approach sensitive conversations about assessing the family's board strength and some weaknesses or some areas of improvement?
So when you're evolving into that independent stage, you are starting often, you have this family board and it's all family members, and now you need to move into an independence. You got to create space for the independents to come on. You can simply add, but you also maybe at that point assessing the capabilities of family members. And some of this comes in with the evolution of where the business is, the evolution of the ownership group, all of it kind of ticks and ties together. And anybody who knows me knows that my foundation for consulting, period, is all about communication. That you've got to be able to have these conversations and have the foundation of understanding how to have difficult conversations without being difficult, yet address these challenges Because if we ignore it, then you're not really serving the business. I wrote an article, I think a month or two ago, right at the end of last year, titled "What Comes First, the Family or the Business?"
Mm.
And it's kind of, if the family takes care of the business takes care of the family, as we all know. And so this is a really good example of saying, hey, we need to put the business first right now for a minute, and understand who in the family is best served to be on the board. And for those who are not, that's okay. Let's develop those skills through education, through whatever work it might be. And it's not easy to do. And Amy and I have both worked with clients where it has come up where there's maybe a family spot open, but is there a family really capable of doing it? So you got to be able to be really raw and really honest with each other, knowing that our common goal is to drive this business. And that's why we're even looking at an independent board, because you really are thinking about putting the business first from an ownership perspective.
Mm, David, I love that. And I feel like that could be a tweet. Having the difficult conversations without being difficult, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yep.
like that. That's a
Yeah.
t-shirt too. That's a t-shirt.
Yeah. Well,
With an
Let's do it.
FBCG logo.
Right. All right. All right. So we can take away some key things that you guys just said. And, bringing in those advisors to help to support the alignment, making sure that the owners are aligned on strategic priorities for the business, interviewing the current directors to assess your board structure, your culture, your strengths, and the areas of improvement, having those difficult conversations without being difficult, establishing the clear candidate criteria, right? Being all aligned on the same page around that, and define the selection process and timeline, what that looks like for you. And then making sure that once this is done, once you've assessed your needs, you're able to produce a board prospectus, which outlines important business factors and your desired expertise, that what you're looking for in your directors. So these are
right.
things that we want you guys to take away. All right, guys. So let's shift to this next component of, the search process, sourcing candidates. In a family business, sourcing candidates isn't just about the qualifications. It's also about finding the candidates that are able to navigate the complexities of a family business, right? The family dynamics, and bringing in those really valuable outside perspectives. David, what are some of the traits? This was one of the biggest things that our audience, is had some challenges with, around the traits and skills that independent directors should bring to a family
Yep.
business board. Tell us about what it looks like in terms of the strengths and the
So
traits.
there's a tool that we use that I think we're going to bring it up and called the skills matrix. And this just
Mhm.
it's one of many tools that we have access to really help families decide what type of skills are needed on the board. And Amy and I will both agree that this is a combination of art and science, right? This is not a fixed, you do this, you check the box, you sum up the total, the person with the most points wins. It doesn't work that way because you've got to have a feel for the person, particularly on a family board. The culture fit. So we kind of break out the skills into two pieces: culture and professional experience. The culture fit is very unique to the family and to the family business. Why? Because every family and every family business has its own unique culture. That's what makes it really special, because it is kind of birthed out of the family. It's the values of the family that transcend into the business. And so ensuring that an individual or a candidate is really a cultural fit for that family. Their character, their ethics, their ability to raise questions, how they view the world, their ability to commit their time. Are they direct and data driven? And those change, right? These are just examples. What you put under cultural fit, we customize because it's got to fit the culture of the family. So that's one of the most important things we talk about first. The second piece we'll talk about is the professional experience. And I tend to tie that to, well, what are the needs of the business today? If you're in a third generation family business and now you're you're at the point where you're forming this independent board, what that what that business needs today is very different than what it needed in G1 or G2, and is different than what it might be in G4 or G5. So you got to understand what are the needs of the business today, and then how do we find the right people to meet the needs of the business. It could be manufacturing business. It could be you're now in a position where you want to scale and you want to bring in, you want to go international. So you may want to bring in someone there. Leadership development. You might be in a transition of the board and moving a transition of the business. And so do we want someone on the board that can help bring G4 in this example up and do some mentoring even? Do they have the strategic division? Strategic vision? And are you looking to acquire? So having somebody that has some M&A experience could be very beneficial. So again, it really does depend. But the way to use this matrix is define the culture, define the key characteristics of an individual. And then as you start to assess your existing board members and then potential candidates, you can score them. And so that's where the science comes into play, is you can really score and get a sense of whether people are there or not. And that helps kind of weed you down to maybe a couple of people. But this matrix I find extraordinarily valuable in just setting up the conversation.
So
It also
valuable.
helps with the
Yeah.
search process itself, because typically we're going to form a committee, and then that committee is going to interview a certain number, and the searches I've done, there's a funnel that Agape and I do, and then we kind of narrow it down, and this helps us narrow it down. I mean, there's
Yep.
criteria for us, and it's more than, gosh, I think this person will fit the family, or I don't think the person will fit the family or fit the executive team. Because remember, boards are not just for the family. Boards are created to help the leadership team and the ownership team and
Yep.
the family. That's what's unique about family boards. And that's where some of the soft stuff comes in that makes this criteria be a little bit more than just what's their resume, what's their board experience, have they run big companies, what do they bring to the table? It's some of that soft stuff too, in the selection process, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like Oprah, you get a copy of this, you get a copy of this. Too bad we don't have a basis, because I would point. But if you would like to receive a copy of this board skills matrix, you let us know. We'd love to give you a copy so that you can use this tool in your family selection process, and we can support you in that as well. But this is definitely something that's really, really helpful as you move along. Amy, where do you source these independent candidates for your family boards? I want to know.
So some of it depends on what kind of board I'm putting together, right? Like, are we going, in what stage are we in? Are we going from family to inviting the first independents in an advisory board? Or are we going to full fiduciary board replacement of people, and we're at a family enterprise level? I mean, all of that stuff matters. But I would say to you, without a definition of the why and the who, like what skills you want, it's hard to search. Once you have that, then our organization has this great service called board searches. I use that. Also, trade associations that these people are in are a great way to get referrals. Their advisors are a great way to get referrals. I always talk to their lawyers, their accountants, their bankers to say, who do you know in this industry or community who may be a good advisor, who's completely independent, who's not a friend, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And you get really good referrals from them. And the reason you get good referrals with them is they know the dynamics of the ownership group, the family group, and the leader, luckily, if they are that involved, a leadership team. So they kind of know who would fit or who would not by gut. It's us to verify that. So again, using a formal search process or company, also trade associations and business associations are really good places to source these. And then advisors, referrals are good. Anybody else you'd add to that stack, David?
Well, I think that no, I think you got a healthy stack there. I think the key piece is, and the reason why we're kind of doing the webinar in the order we're doing, is you got to establish the criteria first. That when we start talking independence, it's like the first thing people do is they kind of always go to their mental Rolodex. So their content, I'm aging myself here by saying Rolodex. Somebody called me vintage last night, by the way, which I'm not sure how I should take
That
that,
means you're worth
but
more money. Come on. When we're
I should
Exactly.
remember
really
that.
get
But anyway, the point is that everybody goes, oh, I know this guy or I know that lady or blah blah blah, whatever it might be, and I kind of always say, slow it, time out for a second. Let's establish that first, because it may not be the person that you're thinking about. Also, are they truly independent if you know them that well? And we'll get into that piece as well. But no, I think Amy, you nailed the people that we can go after for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. Now, you guys brought up independence, and I want us to shift and talk about this. And we are going to play a game. Yes, we're going to play a game. All
it.
right, guys. So, independent or not, to be or not to be, that's the game we're going to play. So, what I'm going to do is I'll share a few scenarios, and you can tell me with a thumbs up or a thumbs down if the person would be considered an independent or not, right? So, let's jump into it. Here's our first scenario. John is Dad's golfing buddy and best friend of 20 years. They play golf together every weekend and take annual vacations with their families. Okay. Amy, is John independent or not?
Not.
Ah, yes, correct. That is correct. He is not an independent. Amy, tell us why he's not an independent.
Because his identity and his relationships keep him from being able to be candid and honest and save his relationship with that man. When you're best friends with someone, sometimes you can have difficult conversations, but if you have to tell them their kid is not the next heir apparent, it might break up your friendship.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that.
Mhm.
All right, David, current lawyer for the family business. Priya, she's the current lawyer for the family business. Is she independent or not?
No, I would say not. While she serves the business, she's already being paid, frankly, to be their attorney. And if you're paying them to be the attorney, let her be the attorney, which I think is great. She doesn't need to be on the board. You don't need to pay them twice. You're already getting their advice. So don't give up a seat on that. Also, if the board decides they need to change law firms, that becomes awkward.
Very much the case. All right, retired accountant, Bruno. Bruno worked for the company as a company's accountant for 30 years before retiring 5 years ago. Is he an independent or not?
Yeah, it's
It
kind of like
depends.
maybe.
I would say there's some polling that needs to be taken on that. Was Bruno neutral? Was he qualified? Is he still
What's
with
the
the
history?
Yeah, what's the history behind it? Could be independent. I mean, we kind of have
Yeah.
some rules around that. You
If
got,
he's retired,
yeah,
is he of age? Right. I mean, not to be ageist, but where is he in his evolution of life? And that's something we need to talk about, right? In terms, as you set the criteria for board, people may age out at 70, 75. So depending on how old Bruno is, that may impact a decision as well.
That's right. And I know some companies have, a cooling off period as well, right? To say if this person has worked in the company and maybe they
Yep.
didn't work there anymore for a certain amount of time, maybe they're okay with taking them back. But then, like to your point, if there's some relationships there as well, there could be some influences, right? In terms of, the decisions he's making, like his independence definitely could be compromised. So, I mean, and if that's the case, we wouldn't be talking about, well, we wouldn't be talking about Bruno. It would
right.
be one of those situations we don't talk about Bruno, right?
No,
Um,
in fact,
so yeah.
if I can give a 30-second example, was working with a client and they were switching CEOs. They had independent CEOs. And so the CEO that was coming off, they were thinking, geez, do we put him on the board? And we advised and said, wait a year, let him kind of cool off in his role as CEO and give the new CEO the autonomy to create his relationship with the board independent of the CEO he was succeeding. So that's a really good example. And then they brought they brought the former CEO on, and it's been a wonderful fit. but you gotta understand, you gotta manage the timing around that.
Yeah, you sure do. That's good. All right. The estate planner, Felicia. Felicia has been the family's estate planner for 15 years. Is she independent or not?
No.
All right. That's a thumbs down.
Thumbs
Bye,
down.
Felicia. Okay. Bye, Felicia. All right. We have a CEO of a major manufacturing company introduced by FBCG Search Practice. Her name is Christina. The CEO, she's just been doing so many amazing things, and she has no prior ties to the family or the business. What do you guys think?
Oh
Independent.
yeah,
All right, that
definitely
is
independent,
awesome.
assuming that they need that. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Now, thank you guys so much. If I had $1 million for this game show, okay, you guys would both have it. All right. You guys are both winners here. But yes, we can joke and we can look at this from a game, but the reality is that there's so many families that are experiencing this. This is so real. David,
It is.
what do you do if dad's golfing buddy is really on the board and he's adding no value and he needs to be replaced? What do you do? How do you feel? Like, what do you do in that situation? This is real, right?
So I think it's not an instant answer, first of all. Second of all, you have to meet the family and the owners and the advisors where they're at. Then we find out about the skills and how it's working, what the concerns are. We listen first. Then we educate, and then we introduce options. So as a family business advisor that's working with families to create an evolving board, we first talk about why is evolution important? How can evolution support the impending transitions occurring within all of those systems? And then why what worked in the past might not work currently or in the future. And then we guide them. But at the end of the day, this is their company and their board. Our job is to try to create alignment and help them make a decision. We don't make decisions for them.
No,
I love that.
no,
That's powerful.
no, absolutely. The only piece I would add on to that, I think that's spot on, is the board development process, the evolution of a board. It is a process, and it often starts with a single decision maker. But when you get to the point now where you've got independents sitting on the board, there's probably multiple decision makers here, and really understanding how is this decision going to be made? Is it strictly, we're voting our shares, and we'll get into that in a minute, or is this still dad's board? And because I've heard that phrase so many times, oh, this is dad's board. And so, is dad really gonna, remove his golfing buddy? And he may have a really hard time doing that. So part of our job is to kind of reset and go, what are we trying to do here? How do we want to make decisions as a group? How do we deal with a situation where there may be conflicting views or opinions? So this all ties into, it's not just simply picking or not picking individuals. There is a lot of emotion in a family business, as we all know, and there's a lot of emotion and dynamics that come into play when you're really trying to, what I'll say, quote unquote, professionalize the family and the system here and move in that direction. It's not easy, and it's why Amy and I have jobs.
One of the things that helps are term limits. Some families have term limits in their boards. Some families don't have term limits. And if they're not ready to ask a golfing buddy to get off, introducing term limits to the organization and the charter and how they use board members is a way to eloquently shuttle people off the board. And personally,
great point.
I was doing some work last week and I heard not about the family business board, but one of the key leaders was saying that he had been on a business board for 26 years.
Yeah.
How independent are they after 26 years?
Yeah, that's a long time.
A really long time. Yeah.
Wow, this is good. This is good. You know what? Let's look at this. Let's look at this. So I want to recap a lot of things that we just got discussed with this. We definitely want to make sure that we identify and create a preliminary candidate list. We want to share the perspectives with your network of potential candidates, what Amy discussed a little earlier. We want to confirm their independence So there's no conflict of interest, and we don't get those golfing buddies. Okay. And sorry, Bruno, we won't be bringing on those type of individuals as well. That's quite questionable. But we definitely want to leverage FBCG's director database in our network, to help you along the way. And then also determine what that long list looks like of prospective candidates so that we can go into the next phase, which is interviewing and selecting, the directors. So let's look at this, right? This often includes a lot of different opinions, identifying red flags and ensuring that you're choosing candidates that complement your existing vision and your values in a judicial way. Amy, how do you know, right? We're going through this process of interviewing. We've done our scorecards. How do you know you found the right independent director for your family business board?
I think it's a hard science and a soft science, right? So in my most recent search, we had a committee, and the committee weighed in, and it was a multiple step process. It wasn't one interview. You look at a resume, you get the candidates in, you select 20, you look at the resume and you go, oh, I'm going to interview 2, right? Like there's a process to this. And so that skills metrics is part of that process. And then you get buy-in, and usually your committee is not huge. You don't want 20 people making a decision. It will take forever. Committee members are usually 3 to 5 people. In my experience, David, have you had them bigger than that?
No, you want them pretty tight.
Yeah. And then that committee weighs in, right? And then depending on how your governing documents work, if you have, 5 candidates and you have 3 spots, that some companies, your committee, your governance committee makes a slate and presents that. Sometimes they present all candidates, but see how the how needs to be defined first. And then at the end of the day, it's not much different than interviewing an employee. Some of it is, okay, so I've got 5 people, they're all highly qualified. What's everybody's gut? Like, how do we think the family is going to interface with these? How do you think that they are listening? How do you think they're going to be able to function? And in my last go around, we actually did a mock board meeting and invited the candidates. They're our top 3. We had 3 positions, our top 3, to see how they worked together. And that's part of the culture fit. It's not like, do these 3 people fit our culture, but how do they interface with each other? And we wound up not inviting one person back and going back to the drawing board because of the chemistry between the 3 possible people. So there, as David said in the beginning, some of this is science and some of it is art. And how we work through that process will get the best candidates. And some of them are like, how busy are you? If I have a candidate that is working full time and on 5 boards already, and they want to add another board in, I'm going to go, hey, family, these might be the best qualified people in the world, but do they really have time?
Right.
How hard is it going to be to schedule them? So those are some of the things that come into play. Did that answer your question, Agape?
Perfectly. Thank you so much. And I love the insight as well around, bringing directors in, whether the night before or for a few days, to have those experiences with them, to get to know them, and to have those mock board meetings, right? I think it's very powerful. Yeah, I think it's powerful.
The other thing I'll see often is the independents have to gel with the board, obviously, but they also have to gel with the family. And they got to be able to gel with the ownership group. And so I worked with a family, and every year they do, after a board meeting, they have a dinner with the ownership group and the board so they can just kind of interface with each other. And it's a large, there's 35 shareholders. And so, they're obviously not on the board. And so it's critical because the board, as I said, the board represents the family. That's their job. They have fiduciary responsibility to the shareholder group. So anyway, just wanted to add that piece. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. David, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Can you describe the voting process for bringing independence on? Right, tell us what that looks like.
Yeah. So building on what Amy said, essentially, once a slate is presented to the shareholder group, it is the shareholders' responsibilities to what I call vote the board. It is one of their primary responsibilities is to vote the board. And so this is where earlier in the webinar, I was saying that there's often a fear of loss of control of shareholders when they're evolving into this independent board. And I always say, understandable, but don't forget that you control the vote and you control who sits on the board. And if you're not happy with a board member, you can remove them. And you choose who sits on that board. So the ultimate control always does stay with the shareholder group. That being said, how they vote is very, very important. There's really two, essentially that I know of, there's really two ways that a shareholder group can vote and make a decision as to who is on the board. One is per person. Each person has a vote, regardless of the amount of shares that they own or the percentage of ownership they have. One person, one vote, and they do it kind of democratically like that. The other way, which I see more commonly, is you vote your percentage of shares. And so if there's if there's 4 owners and it's owned equally, then it's essentially the same thing. As you start to get into multi-generation, 4, 5, 6 generations, chances are pretty good that not everybody's going to have equal ownership, just the way the kind of ownership flows down the bloodlines. And so if there's somebody that owns 25% of the company because he was a kind of an only child that ended up with that line of shares, but he's got cousins who own 12% each or whatever, they vote their percentage, and then it's majority 67 or 70, probably 67 or maybe it could be majority 75% of the vote elects the individual. So there's really two ways: per person, one person, one vote, or you vote your percentage of ownership. And that's the way that I have seen family owners vote the board. Amy, have you seen it done differently?
It depends how formal your board is, right? Like, so if you have a very formal board already and we're replacing independent board members, sometimes there's a huge clause about governance committee. Governance committee does the interviewing, governance committee submits the slate, and then the vote is just yes or no. And it's not individual members. And so if it's a no, then the slate has to go back to the governance committee, and the governance committee then does interviewing what the problem is. So the other thing I want to explain to the audience is don't get so caught up on the voting. Voting gets much simpler when everyone buys into the selection process and has confidence in the committee.
Correct. And absolutely. In fact, I would say that if it's not a unanimous, then you've got a problem in the selection process. If it's that split where, there's some family members that don't want them and there's others that do, I would recheck the process on that. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's a great point.
Most of the time it's a rubber stamp, you guys, because the shareholders buy into how the committee does the selection. And if the committee is united, the vote is like, it's simple. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And by the way, this same process is applied to family members, not just independents. When you get to this level of a board and you have an independent fiduciary board, the same process is applied to family members.
Yeah. David, that's another webinar for another day. But that's
yeah.
But that's good. It's so good. That's so good. Okay, so let's look at this. Let's look at this. So we want to, when we're talking about interviewing and selecting, we want to make sure that that's why it's so important when we talk about alignment. We started with alignment. We wanted to make sure that communication is there, the alignment is there, so that when you get to this process, it's unanimous. It's just everyone is on the same page and there's a much better flow. So here's some things that we want to leave with you. Conduct interviews to assess cultural fit and competence when it comes to this, right? Review the candidate profiles with your nominating committee or whomever that group may be to identify a strong short list, right? Only the best. And to facilitate decision-making process amongst the committee so that you're all on the same page. Again, once you get to this step, select, prepare, and integrate new board members. And I'm going to repeat that, making sure that you select, prepare, and integrate the new board members, and making sure that means onboarding them properly. Okay. But this is really good. We want to keep going. We definitely want to keep going here. I want to just ask one question around some of the common pitfalls in terms of what are some of the top 3 concerns you frequently hear when recruiting family business boards? For family business boards, what are some of the top things you hear when recruiting for family business boards that are some concerns from the family? Amy, what do you think?
Why would we want independence? Nobody understands our business. They're not going to fit our business. I dig holes for a living and take granite out of the ground. I'm a farmer. I'm making nutrition powders. Nobody else understands the food business or the farming business. And you know what? They do. There are commonalities in each kind of business, and it is our job to update them on industry standards. But yes, there are people that do. The next is, I don't want people to know how crazy we are. Okay, well, if we're family, families are complex. And by the way, part of this process is to support all systems and decrease drama, and it will.
That's right.
And we will form processes to get the family conversations and decisions out of the business board and put it in the right place.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I'm a little insecure about introducing my leadership team to accountability. So this whole idea of boards holding leaders accountable. If your leader is your brother, your CEO is your brother, and he's never really had a boss, how is that going to work? Or if your leadership team is independent leadership team and they're not family members, but they've never answered to a board, how are they going to react and will they leave? Those are some of the common things we hear about. Anything else you would add to that list, David?
I mean, there's lots of different pieces, but the common ones, no, those are them. It's just it's a sea change in your comfort level of bringing in third-party people with opinions that actually have decision-making ability, and that can be unnerving. And so you got to kind of go into it with an open mind and really curious about what we're trying to do here, and knowing that it's ultimately for the betterment of the family business. And research actually even supports that family businesses that have independent boards survive and perform better than those that do not. So yeah, no, I think you hit it.
Yeah, substantially.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. This is so significant, and the data speaks for itself. You know, you're so right. I want to take a moment. I want to jump into Q&A, but before we do that, I want to just take a moment to inform the audience that they're not alone. You're not alone, right? As you're going through this process, I know we've mentioned it a couple of different times, but I just want you to know that, you know, FBCG is here to support you and be a resource for you as you navigate this process, as you navigate some of those biggest challenges, right? We've been around for 30 years. We've helped over 3,000 consultants in 70 different, we've helped over 3,000 client families in over 70 countries. We have 34 amazing consultants that have deep academic and real world experience that can help you in a variety of areas, right? So we specialize in all these things you see on the screen. But beyond that, we have a board search practice that can support you in board facilitation, you know, independent director search, policy implementation, helping to make those decisions. Who's making the decisions? The owners, the independent directors, the management. We can help you with all of these things in terms of making sure that you are evolving your board in a really great way, so that your family business can prosper for generations to come. So I had to give a shout out to FBCG. I would be remiss if I didn't, if I did not give a shout out and making sure that you know that you are not alone and we're here to help you. All right, now let's jump into some Q&A. David, Amy, are you ready for some Q&A?
Let's do it. Let's tee it up.
All right. So audience, there's a box. There's the Q&A box. If you want to go ahead and drop your questions in the chat, please do. We want to tackle them. And whatever we're not able to get to today, David and Amy has been so gracious to be able to volunteer and to put some answers on social media, and just follow up however necessary to get some of those questions answered for you, okay? I want to kick off the first question, right? From the audience, I got one coming in. How important is it for an independent board director to have experience and knowledge in my industry? And how is compensation determined?
Yep. So I'll tackle that one first, and Amy add on. I think it's while I won't say it's essential, I think it's very important that an independent have some industry experience, at least understand. They got to understand the business, and they can do that by spending time with the organization. But if you're really trying, again, depending on what the goal of the independent board is, having some industry experience is always helpful, because it's like they have a level set and they understand how that particular business functions within the industry they're in. So I think it's certainly a nice to have. I wouldn't call it a need to have, but I think it would be great. The compensation, kind of a second question. Their compensation is important. You've got to be able to treat this board as if they are as important and valuable as a shareholder, or as important as valuable as your CEO and or management team. They need that level of kind of respect or value, and compensation is one form of showing that. And there are resources out there. Private Director has a resource. There's tons of them, and we have those resources too. And so it's something that certainly Agape or any one of our consultants can help guide the conversation around, is what is the appropriate compensation for the board that you're trying to fill here. And it may depend on the industry, company size, revenue, all sorts of different factors that come into play. But you should plan. You got to look at this as an investment, not an expense. Like, that is a serious mindset. This is an investment in your family. This is an investment in your company. And I really encourage you to look at it that way.
I love that.
I would
I love
say
that.
something my grandma used to say to me. If the advice is free, how valuable is it?
That's right.
Now,
Yep.
as we're putting on a free webinar, but but I, if you're asking someone to advise you on strategic direction of your company,
Yeah.
which is typically the family's largest, most valuable asset, why would you ask them to do it for free?
Yeah. Hey, we got more questions in the chat.
Yeah, there's
And
tons.
I feel like, Amy and David, if you're ready, like I'm ready, we can pull off a lightning round and try to tackle quite a few of these questions. Are you guys?
Yeah, go for it.
Go.
All right.
Go for it.
What are your suggestions for the size and skill makeup of a first advisory board? What are your suggestions for the size and skill makeup of a first-time advisory board?
Amy, you want to start with that?
Sure. First, I need to know why we're doing it. That's number one. Don't get too big. Start with really qualified people and introduce the size slowly. You have to take little steps to allowing someone to see your company, see your systems, and have the right skill matrix that depends on what your family needs, what your business needs, what are your strategic objectives, and what current talent you have inside those systems. But I would, business boards are not volunteer boards. Bigger is not better. Keeping it to a manageable size where people can have the time and voice in the room to share their expertise is critical. Our boards are not 17 big. That's not how we build them.
No, 3 to 5 on an advisory, 7 to 9 on an independent. I wouldn't get bigger than that.
Yeah.
Okay. Got another one coming in hot off the press. The way our bylaws are written, we do not allow spouses to be considered as family directors, but they could technically be independent directors. That said, based on your earlier discussion, it sounds like they would fit well as independents. Sounds like they would fit well as independents either. How have you seen this situation managed?
Yeah, so I would, I'm weary. I'm not weary of spouses. I'm weary of spouses serving on boards for a couple of reasons. One, they're a spouse, so are they truly independent, right? If they're not going to be, according to your bylaws, they're a family, right? So they're really not independent. I mean, they share a pillow, so you got to be careful there. The other piece is there's such a plethora of talent out there that I think you're avoiding potential challenges if you are able to not have that person serve on the board. Also, what happens if the spouse and there's a divorce? Like, how do you handle that? Right? It just adds unnecessary, in my opinion, it adds unnecessary complication to an already complicated situation. I wouldn't do it.
Okay, so I think that's the general. I think where spouses do well in governance is in family councils. They have a voice, they can have a leadership role,
Absolutely.
right? Now, I'm going to tell you, I work with families where spouses are not just board members, but they're owners. And that's been very intentional, and it's been planned and supported, and they are on the board, and it's very successful. But I would call that a unicorn rather than it
Yeah.
takes a lot of education, a lot of trust, and a lot of planning to make that work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't believe they're independent at all.
No.
Yeah. Here's another one that's come in. Do you need D&O insurance?
I would recommend. I'd recommend that there's directors and officers insurance is what Agape is talking about. I would recommend it, particularly for the fiduciaries. They're making decisions, and when you make decisions, there are risks associated with those decisions, and so you want to have D&O insurance to protect against that, because there can be lawsuits. So yes, in fact, I wouldn't serve on a board if I didn't have D&O insurance.
And I'm finding even on advisory boards that true independents want D&O. And there is some emerging case law that says they need it. And so I would say you need it. Yes, get it. Not that expensive. Put it in place.
Yeah. All right. We have another question coming in. How can the next generation plan or advocate for independent directors when seats are available?
To be independent directors, or to have a voice in putting them in independent directors?
Let's see. How can the next generation plan or advocate for independent directors when seats are available?
So what we talk about is having the next generation. I'm going to take this as, how do they have a voice in the selection of independent directors as seats are available?
Yeah.
So I believe that's intergenerational education and influence. So you might not have a vote, but should you be on the committee for the selection in some way? Should you have a voice? And that is also educating the governance committee for formal boards as to why it's so important to have the potential members and independents meet the next generation. And I teach that that's because that will be that next generation's boards, because many of my boards have 15-year terms, 10-year terms. So, think about it. If they're in their 40s and the next gens are in their 40s and their parents are in their 60s and 70s, and you're selecting independents, that will be the next generation's independent board members, at least for a little bit. Right?
Yeah.
So they should meet them. There should be some chemistry. There should be some litmus test, a voice, at least, if not a vote.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is great. We're gonna wrap up this Q&A, and if we did not tackle your question, don't worry. Amy and David will definitely try to tackle some of these questions via social media and whatever means possible. Okay.
Well, I think if I can just add one thing onto that, I think what Amy, you and I talked about is we might just do our own little Zoom conversation, and we'll record it, and we won't be able to tackle all of these. I'm sure we're going to be able to capture these questions. So the folks in the background in FBCG, let's make sure we record these or get a hold of these. And Amy and I will do our best to get a bunch of them off, and we'll zip out a recording in the next couple of weeks, or a few. Give us a little bit of time. Could be about a month.
And we are available to be reached by email and phone calls for follow-up as well. Our follow-up information is in the materials. So
that's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much, Amy and David. Thank you, audience, for being with us today. We definitely want to make sure that we stay connected, we stay in touch, and you know exactly where to find us, www.thefbcg.com. Hey, we have some action steps for you before you go. Take a closer look at your current board structure. Does it align with your family business long-term goals? Making sure that you start defining those skills and experiences and qualities that the right independent director should be able to bring to the table. And then also, as another call of action we want you to do, is reach out to us and learn how you can partner and we can work with you to find the perfect candidate. Make sure that you share this recording with your shareholder group for sure, and have a conversation with your shareholder group. Have a conversation with that non-gov committee about this webinar. Hey, continue the conversation, and we are here. Hey, Justin Albertson's information is right in front of you. If you have questions, contact Justin, contact the FBCG. We're here to help. Before you go, also keep in mind we will have a survey. Your feedback is a gift to us. Hey, we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. This has been so much fun, so informative. The best is yet to come for you and your family governance. Stay tuned for more, and we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Have a great day, guys. Thank you for
Thanks,
joining.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Agape.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.